Folks, as the CFL season takes high gear, we continue our tour of the league, if you will, with a guest, a first-time guest of the show from the West Division and from 980 CJME and 650 KCOM. It is the one and only Riders reporting, Britton Gray. Sir, how are we doing on this fine Tuesday afternoon at the end of May?
Good. It's a beautiful day out here in Saskatchewan. A little windy. 650 CKOM. I have to clarify that.
Apologies. I literally have the video from the Green Zone Open, and I was just going like CKOM. That's my bad.
My bosses, if they saw this, would be like, you better fix the call letters. So make sure I do that. But no, otherwise, sunny. It was real warm at Mosaic Stadium as we get this training camp underway, which is great because in Saskatoon for the first part of training camp, it was miserable. It was raining. It was windy. So I'm glad to finally have sunshine in Saskatchewan.
Oh, you can't beat it. You cannot beat it. That's the beautiful thing about the CFL season 2 is that it's not like the NFL where it's like, oh, it's like the end of the summer and like beginning of fall when the weather's starting to turn cold. No, CFL, it's right at the beginning of summer. It's that beautiful time of the year. All of Canada is like, defrosted. We're doing great and just ready to enjoy some football.
Exactly. The long winters, and especially in Saskatchewan, they're real long. And when you hit -40, it has you craving for training camp.
Absolutely. So a reason why I wanted to talk to a Saskatchewan Roughrider person, there's a few reasons. The first being the simple fact that you guys are kind of the central hub of the CFL in the sense of just the most passionate fan base, most dialed in. You guys are freaking everywhere. So, there's that too. But also because last year, you guys were the team that was at the bottom of the league in terms of just like how 22 and 23 went under Craig, to where Corey Mace, former Argonauts defensive coordinator, comes in, and all of a sudden, you guys are in the West Final and a game away from going to the Grey Cup. So leaning into that, how do you feel like the Rough Riders can improve on what we saw in 2024 to 2025?
I think it's two things. One, Trevor Harris stays healthy. He's going to be the reason this team goes. I know we can talk about the backup quarterbacks, sure, but Trevor Harris is this team. He's the starter. This team is best with him and how he plays. So that's big. And also just don't have a random gust of wind give the Bombers a victory near the end of the season. I do believe if the West Final was in Saskatchewan, in Regina, they beat the Bombers. They had to go to Winnipeg. That place is so tough to win in. And so that's really keep it simple. Otherwise, it's just keep building. Corey Mace has talked about the culture he's bringing in. All these guys have kind of bought in so far. And that's really it. Continuity was key. And it just feels like this team is still on that upswing and can be even better than what we saw last season.
I'm just going to pull this over. It's from the championship rally, but you're welcome. But no, I love the Trevor Harris take because I actually, on the chance on the show last week, got to speak to Matthew Shinetti of TSN. And him and I were talking about Trevor Harris in the sense, like, I brought it more or less that he's got that, like, Cody Fajardo-ish weight onto him where it's, he won his Grey Cup with Toronto, but he was a backup. But he would love, I feel like, in my opinion, I feel like you could probably vouch for this more, to have one that's his own. To have that Grey Cup that's Trevor Harris was the lead author on the book, on the song. This is all not credit to him, but this is like he's the main catalyst behind bringing a championship back to Saskatchewan to truly cement his. No, I don't want to say legacy because I feel like the word legacy just gets thrown around way too much in sports, but CFL career.
I would say legacy is fine to turn around, but Trevor Harris is going to finish. I think, what is he already top 10 in career passing yards already? Yeah. He's up there in touchdowns. You look at the stats, it's all kind of there for Trevor Harris, but he's never won a Grey Cup as a starting quarterback. He just hasn't done that quite yet. And every quarterback, I have Cody Fajardo, who've had these backup roles. You have to win one as a starter to really cement your claim. So I think there is that kind of argument for Trevor Harris's legacy and where he ends up in terms of how we talk about him in the future of the CFL, because his name is going to be all over the record books when you look at how long he's played for, the yards he throws, the touchdowns. Just can he get it done in the Grey Cup? I think he can. I will say I wasn't a believer in Trevor Harris until he got to Saskatchewan, got a chance to really talk to him and get inside his mindset. He's really won me over in terms of just talking to him with the way he approaches the game and really what he's done so far here in Saskatchewan, that I do think he has what it takes to win a Grey Cup. But now at this point in his career, he'll be 39 when the season starts. That's really the biggest thing around him is how many more years does he have left, if any, after this year? We don't know what his plans are.
Exactly. And I'm sorry if there's some distraction, but a bug decided to randomly start creeping up on my foot, so I had to grab a piece of paper on my desk and squash it. I wanted to retract my legacy statement. I'm not saying that's there, but I just feel like, everyone right away, the argument of like legacy gets thrown out. That's why I just feel like it's a word, it can be an overused words at times, but I feel like the two things with the Riders quarterback situation I love is the fact that, look, Trevor Harris is a guy that's determined, always comes up here, always has a workman-like attitude. But I really love the fit for Jake Maier as a backup, because I know Calgary didn't work out the best for him. They're a team kind of in, I don't really know, I want to say they're like not in turmoil, but they're kind of in a weird crossroads right now where it's like the roller coaster's coming to an end for them. But with Saskatchewan to learn under Trevor Harris, he has a chance to really resurrect his career and kind of prove to everyone that, like, hey, I'm going to take the time to learn and everything like that. Mm-hmm. But the big player that I have on mind for Saskatchewan to have a really good season, just because last year I didn't realize the off-the-field mentals, is AJ Ouellette at the running back position, because we all know what he's capable of, but I didn't realize that there was a very taxing divorce that he went through, and also he was injured for last year. But I really think we get a really good year out of AJ. We kind of see the Thor hammer throwing AJ we saw on Labor Day in 2023 against Hamilton.
Yeah, well, I'll speak quickly with Jake Maier. I'm also excited to see what he can do. As you're right, I put a lot of the blame on Calgary on Jake Maier, but the more you heard about what was happening in that Calgary locker room, it really felt like maybe he wasn't the problem. Something was rotten there, and I don't think it actually fell as much onto Jake Maier as we originally maybe thought in terms of how he played. So excited to see what he can do. He's got a tough battle. Jack Cohn has looked really good in this training camp and preseason as well. Not saying I think this team goes with Jake Maier, but it's maybe not as cut and dry as we originally thought. AJ Ouellette, I can't talk about what happened off the field, but on the field, him getting leaner, I think. He went through that kind of workout. It was a challenge, I guess, at the gym he was at. They all did a big challenge. He was a part of it. I don't think he won. I can't remember he said he won, but he did this, and he just looks quicker. He has that kind of power, but he has that burst more at the line. And so I'm excited to see what he can do. I mean, we saw a preseason game one. He hurdled a guy already in the preseason. He's ready to go. And I think it's also he's fired up because he dealt with a hip injury last year. Yeah, it hurt him more than I think we knew. He had it in training camp, never really fully got healthy. And then I think by the time he was healthy in that West final, by that point they had to throw the ball so much because they were down early, down so big so early. I'm excited to see what AJ Ouellette can do. I think this team absolutely is better when they can have a balance instead of just having to throw the ball so much.
The one thing I love about this team last year, too, is, look, they got the win against Edmonton before Edmonton really became anything. And then it was the back-to-back wins against Hamilton for me that really cemented this team to where, look, early on, they won games in just critical situations. They found a way to win. But I noticed as 2024 went on, that honeymoon phase just eviscerated for Corey Mason, where people were like, oh, look, he's the first-year head coach, yada, 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 to where I feel like when that early success came, it kind of just like I said, it evaporated for him to where he kind of had to earn it back. And then I think the real turning point of the season, you can correct me if I'm wrong, was the win against BC and around Thanksgiving last year, where you guys, I believe, and I'm going to say this because it's my own show, but belt to ass to them if I'm not mistaken. So from there on, it was kind of like the catalyst for you guys to like really vault forward to get to the West final. Obviously, like you said, look, there's a gust of wind that could have changed things, but because of that gust of wind, your biggest rival's the opposite of a dynasty, losing 3 Grey Cups in a row. But you know what? That's where I feel like with Corey Mace, because we know Corey Mace has that like player buy-in mentality that we started to see. Like, look, it started down south, but now you're seeing it up north where all these coaches get buy-in from their guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. Like this locker room is completely bought into what Corey Mace is telling them. The culture is completely different than what we have with Craig Dickinson here. Absolutely, they're buying in. In terms of the catalyst last year, it really was when Trevor Harris came back from injury. They didn't win right away, but having him back really just solidified it. He worked off some rust. And then, of course, there was the Rockwell Armstead game he had against Calgary where we had 250 yards. He had the most yards by a rusher in a Rider debut ever. So he went off. That was the catalyst because Trevor Harris, finally, you got that win. Trevor Harris was back, and that's why I said the key here is Trevor Harris. Now, Jake Maier, if he does get in, I have a little bit more faith in him than maybe what Shea Patterson ended up showing us after he got in. But Trevor Harris, I really can't state how important. It just feels like he's the key to how this thing's going to run, at least for this season.
Absolutely. And I only said the Jake Maier thing just because the Calgary exit for him was really ugly of how they only won this, missing the playoffs for the first time in 20 years. You know, Jake Maier, because like so I wasn't at the Grey Cup last year, but I was there in 2023 doing stuff. And I saw Stamps fans. I just said, hey, what your vibe on Maier? And they weren't even sold at that point, to where now he kind of has a chance to, him in his own sense, rewrite his own story as well, to where, hey, if he has to come in, you know, I say that just because, look, you never wish for injuries, which we'll get into, because I know Saskatchewan's been unfortunately bit by the bug a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But he has the chance to really show the rest of the league that, say, if a starting job becomes open in 26 or 27, because, look, for as much quarterback movement as there was this offseason, there are a couple of guys that are on the back nine of their careers. And even there's a team like the one that I follow closely and cover in Toronto, where it's a little in question right now just with injuries. So he really has a chance to go out there and just show the rest of the league, hey, who you saw in Calgary, that's not who I am.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely in the right to bring up Jake Maier. He could have a very important role to play this season. Trevor Harris, since he's come to Saskatchewan, it's back-to-back years with knee injuries. And in fact, we found out that his knee injury he suffered last year was more serious than we were originally told. He did have a partial tear in his ACL. He dealt with that and the MCL thing. There are a ton of concerns around Trevor Harris. You hope you don't have to go to Jake Maier, but he very well could play an important part of this Rider season. And it'll be interesting how he bounces back from that time in Calgary, because, yeah, he wore it. He was the guy who got the blame, as the quarterback does when things aren't going right.
Yeah. I mainly bring him up, too, just because you see in the world, especially with the CFL, having a backup quarterback that you can rely on and not have those insecurities about playing makes a world of difference.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm going to bring up Toronto again because it's a prevalent example, but Chad Kelly had the gruesome injury against Montreal. Nick Arbuckle comes in, steers the ship in the East Final. Boom, they're hoisting their 19th Grey Cup last November. So I don't know if that's exactly the story for Jake Maier as of now, because we can't look 6 months into the future. If we did, I think you could be very happy for all we know. But it's the fact that there's the trust there, no matter if it's him, no matter if it's Cone. Corey has a guy there that, God forbid, something happens to Trevor's knees again, he can look at his backup and say, hey, Jake, time to go. We have full trust in you. Go run the offense and just make it rain to Keon Schaefer Baker's arms and go about your day.
Yeah, no, and Mark Mueller has full trust in Jake Maier. There's a reason they went out and got him. Mark Mueller's a big part of that. He was the quarterback's coach when they decided to move off Bo Levi Mitchell to go to Jake Maier. And a lot of familiarity. I love the fit for Jake Maier. I love this as an opportunity to really have a chance to show what he can do. But I think Rider fans would prefer if maybe that chance is next season instead of seeing him out there this year.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just saying that, like, hey, there is the event of you have the trustworthy backup. It's kind of like, even if, like, for example, Bo Levi Mitchell in Hamilton last year gets yanked, was told he's benched, he's back in there because Taylor Powell, they couldn't play him. So that's where I mean, there's that seems to be that trust factor in the QB room. But where does the team go from here? Because, look, I know there is the one offensive lineman today, I believe, is out for the year with the torn ACL. And then I believe there's another one with is it a biceps tendon or is it a torn bicep? Torn bicep. So with those kind of injuries, how confident are you that the Riders just easily pivot to the guys that, like, hey, football, it's next man up?
I think there's becoming a saying in Saskatchewan. It's in Edwin Harrison we trust. He's the offensive line coach. This was a team that had 13 different starters along the offensive line last year due to injuries. And they didn't look terrible. There were games where it felt like they didn't miss a beat. And even when they finally got some consistency at the end of last season, they played really good. Like, that was a good offensive line group that they managed to just kind of find. And so I do think it's up. Now, losing Sean McEwen for the year with the torn ACL, that's a big one. They lost him early in camp, and we finally got the confirmation of what it was today from Corey Mace. It is a torn ACL. He's not coming back. Philippe Gagnon, it was a big one of the big offseason acquisitions they got from Montreal. Veteran guy who can play at the guard spot. But, and this is why I think the Riders are actually in a better spot than people might think, because those are great players to lose. Don't get me wrong. You'd rather have them out there.
Yeah.
They're rolling out 3 Americans along the offensive line. They have the ability to send out another Canadian receiver, which has allowed them to put Jamarcus Hardrick at tackle, Jacob Rammer, who this team must have fell in love with last year. I thought he played really well in the maybe 2-3 games he had played for them, because he came in when Hardrick got hurt. Then he got hurt with his own knee injury, and we didn't see him again. This team must have fell in love with him because they've switched the ratio to get him out there. And so he's going to be playing now. And then Trevion Tate, who they got from Calgary last season after he was released from there. So I think this team is ready to weather the storm. And it's all going to start in the center with Logan Ferland, who, sorry, Toronto fans, in my opinion, he was the most outstanding offensive lineman last season with the way he was able to go tackle, guard, center, just all the moving around. He's going to be this team's center now that they've lost Sean McEwen, because he has that much trust from the coaching staff, despite the fact he's never played center before in his football career outside of last year. I think they're just going to get better as this year goes on. If they can once again stay healthy, you really need to stay healthy now, though, because once you get to 8, 9, 10, it's always a lot of question marks how good those guys are going to be in the offensive line room.
Exactly. And look, all I say is this too, as I don't know if the offensive lineman you're referring to can cook like Ryan Hunter, but that's another story for another fun day in the world of the CFL. Want to pivot away a bit just to more talk about the wild west, because I feel like this year, and this is another reason why I've look, for as long as I've been covering the league, it's just easy to fall in love with, is the fact that there's parity. But obviously, look, it kind of stops with the fact that the West has gone through Winnipeg the last few years. So if you were to take off your Rider cap, because obviously, look, you guys hate Winnipeg more than anything, and I recently discovered why it's called the Banjo Bowl. Yeah, I found that very funny when I learned that it's because one fan base called the other a bunch of banjo playing in Brett Hicks.
That was the punter from Winnipeg.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you were to take that hat off, how do you view the rest of the how do you view Winnipeg going into this year? But then how do you view the other teams? Because I feel like each team has either a different path to go on, or they're going to have a different story to tell. Because honestly, when I look at the West, I really can't pick a winner at the moment.
Well, first of all, I don't hate teams. I'm as a reporter, it's kind of like, hey, whatever happens. Go ahead, Winnipeg. Go to your 6th. Yep. I just don't. I haven't liked what I've seen from Winnipeg over the past couple seasons, despite the fact they continue to get to the Grey Cup. I get that, but it's just felt like they haven't necessarily been as good as the rest of the West has kind of been playing catch up and dealing with injuries. And it feels like the rest of the West just has kind of allowed them to kind of go on this roll rather than them really being the cream of the crop as we've expected them to over the last couple seasons. I thought Zach Collaros at times looked terrible last year. I'm just going to say what it is. And I think they're a gust of wind away from not making it to the Grey Cup. But hey, they get there. Full credit to Winnipeg. They continue to prove me wrong and continue to get there. But I think that they finally have some, adversity to handle in the offseason. They've been the beacon of consistency in the CFL. Now they've lost Buck Pierce. Adam Bighill isn't gone, who you can talk about where maybe he was slower, sure, still the heart of that defense. They've lost some veterans. They lost Ford, right? They've lost some big names that it's going to be really tough to just replace like that. And Zach Collaros, how does he look another year older? He's not going to play the first. The weirdest suspension ever is happening in Winnipeg, kind of where usually nothing happens. Like I said, beacon of consistency. But he's not playing in week number 2 because they have the first week bye. So I just think I expect them to really take a step back. I don't see where the upward trajectory is for that team anymore. And I just think BC, I think Nathan Rourke's going to have a bounce back year now that he's back, has a full offseason. You don't have the whose team is it? Is it Vernon Adams' team? Is it Nathan Rourke's? It's Nathan Rourke's team. I expect him to be a little bit better and that team to be better. I expect Edmonton to finally take that step forward. I really like Mark Killam as a head coach. I think Trey Ford has the ability to be a game breaker, and they go out and get Cody Fajardo. They all of a sudden have that backup quarterback where if you need to go to him, it's a Grey Cup winner, a Grey Cup. They have some depth there. So I view the Riders as the number one team in the West right now, just on paper, just the continuity. We'll see how these injuries come into play. You can't predict that. I have BC number 2 just because I think Nathan Rourke is going to reclaim that form, and I really like how hungry I think they're going to be after, quite frankly, kind of being embarrassed by the fact that the Grey Cup was in their hometown. It was in Vancouver, and they couldn't even get a home playoff game that season. I think they're going to be hungry. I like Edmonton. I have Winnipeg on the outside looking in just because that's an older core, and eventually, we always say Father Time is undefeated. Eventually, it catches up with teams. This might be the year now. I've said that the past 2 seasons, right? I've said this team just feels like they're too old, and they continue to prove me wrong. So
3rd time's a charm, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so my quick view on the West, I agree with you with BC. I also think that Nathan Rourke doesn't have that mental cloud of, the NFL didn't work out, so I came back here. Another underrated storyline with them is a full season of Matthew Betts as well, who also had his NFL journey last year. Edmonton, I'm not sure if they're ready to, I'm not saying they're going to the Grey Cup. I think there could be a team that, challenges for a playoff spot, but could be on the outside looking in just because, Saskatchewan's going to be there. BC's going to be there. I don't want to count Winnipeg out until they give me a reason to count them out. But Calgary's the only team right now where I'm just like, it just seems like it's coming to an end. They're putting in a new field. They're getting the stadium ready because they got awarded the Grey Cup next year, which look, that's another story on its own. But for the most part, I agree with you too with Saskatchewan, where they're the team. They're the it kid. They're the kids that they're the team in green that a lot of people love, and they're the team in green that, look, a lot of people have expectations on. And the fact that I keep saying this, but that first game that you guys play in, we're going to find out so much about both teams. We're going to find out what Ottawa's made out of, which we'll get into the East in a little bit just because I'm curious to see what you have to say. But for Saskatchewan, too, it's, hey, look at Saskatchewan, because they go out there and, last year we got a quick taste with Winnipeg where they got their doors blown off by the Alouettes, and right away we were like, oh, the Alouettes are going to do what the Argos did in 23, which ironically that's what happened to them in 2024. But for that game with the Riders and the Red Blacks, or if we really want to go old school, Rough Riders versus Rough Riders, it's going to be a very interesting story. But yeah, I completely agree with you. And then with me with Calgary, like I was saying earlier, I just think, look, I like VA, but I really do think it's like a changing of the guard there, where it's like they're not going to have the best year, or they shock the world and surprise us. But I'd pick the latter right now. Yeah,
I agree with Calgary. It just feels like they haven't done enough to really make me think there's enough change there. Something was rotten last year. As we've seen, though, it's the CFL. We never had Montreal winning when they went out and won it at the beginning of that season. I think everyone had them finishing last in the league. They win the Grey Cup. You never know, but I just don't see the path. And yeah, with the Riders against Ottawa, you're right. This team needs to come out quick. The Riders should be the best team week 1 because they have the most continuity. They didn't have a major change in the coaching staff. If they're not looking like the best team in week 1, something may have gone wrong, because with all the continuity, everyone they brought back, running it back essentially almost to a T with last year, you have to have a fast start here.
Yeah, I completely agree, because look, there's the first game against it's East tour right off the bat. You guys play Ottawa, you come to Hamilton, then you come to Toronto. So right away, I feel like a lot of the Eastern fans are going to kind of get a sense of who the Rough Riders are. And I feel like if they're 2-1 or 3-0 after that start, just because, look, it's really hard to predict a team going undefeated. I feel like Rider fans will be confident. But if there's a loss in there, if the loss in there is either not a close one, or look, I don't know what's worse, losing close or losing by a Miss Rouge. But regardless, I think if they can go 2-1 or 3-0 to start that stretch, you really start to build something where it's like, I like what the Riders are doing here, to where you could really not just put the West on notice, but put the whole league on notice.
My colleague Jamie Nye has 13 wins for the Riders. So to get to 13, you better win most of the games you should win if you're going to be a Grey Cup team.
Exactly. I want to pull up the rest of the schedule just to see how the meat and potatoes of it goes. But because and also too, I just realized this too, every team has their preseason game Friday night, every single one of them. But then that little stretch in July where it's versus Calgary, at BC, and then versus Edmonton, I like that too. And then man, Saturday, August 2nd, you guys at Montreal. That's I like the stretching like here just to see, because it's like, hey, we played the East, now we're playing the West, but you guys versus Montreal, that's a game where I think a lot of people quickly are going to see, like, in the prime Friday night spot, what are both these teams? Because these are two teams that could easily be playing in Winnipeg come November 16th.
Yeah, you can read into that Montreal game. As long as I've been covering this team, Montreal road trips are weird. Yeah. It doesn't matter what the record is. If a team from out west heads to Montreal, you have no idea what's going to happen. I mean, the Riders got blown out by Davis Alexander. Like, that was where Davis Alexander really came into the game and lit things up on the Riders after did they pull their starting quarterback at halftime, and then all of a sudden Davis Alexander wins them that game in Montreal, or that might have been at the touchdown Atlantic. They played so many games recently out east in Toronto. I can't remember touchdown Atlantic, but the Montreal game, I can't put too much stock in. Every year, it's doesn't matter. The Riders could be undefeated going into that game, lose by 40, and I would be like, well, that's just the Montreal road trip for this team. It's just how it has been for years here.
Yeah. I just put a little bit of onus on that game just because look like how it's kind of getting near the midway point of the season where it's like, hey, what could be a catalyst for the rest of the year there? Because like it's like one of those things where, and also too with now going out east, it's not as noisy anymore. That's something to be thankful for if you're a Rough Rider fan going to that game. But I meant it in the sense of like, hey, if you can go in there and win it, it's a game where it's like, oh, like. These guys, not that like I don't want to say the for real, just because with the CFL season doesn't start till Labor Day. Once you guys play the Banjo Bowl, once the Labor Day Classics go on, that's when the season truly can begin. Just because there's teams that changed their fortunes there. Look at Montreal 2 years ago, to where then you win a game like that in the beginning of August. It kind of can be that turning point catalyst headed towards Labor Day, to where it's like, hey, because come Labor Day, we don't know. We could have you guys be the belle of the ball, and then there's Winnipeg coming just leaping in, because I even look at the season where 2 years ago on Labor Day where you guys had the hit against Zach Collaros, and then a few days later it wasn't exactly pretty, but like that was like unfortunately their turning point for their season. So I can see a similar thing happening this year, but for the good guys to my right, not the bad guys that their fans hate.
Yeah, the Montreal game, it'll like if they win, don't get me wrong, that'll be a big thing, because they finally go to Montreal and put up a good performance for the first time in a long time, it feels like. But yeah, as you mentioned, Labor Day, and that's really where that's where we're going to see what Winnipeg is and what the Riders are this season, because I thought Winnipeg wasn't even going to make playoffs last year with how they started. They right the ship as they do. So I'm excited for Labor Day this year. It just finally it feels like the Riders should beat the Bombers, which is something we really haven't been able to say since pre-COVID. When the Bombers have gone on this run, it feels like they've been really the team to beat. Well, they have been since 2019.
Yeah, that's just it. And also, I love the fact that you're with Labor Day, how it's just the 3 rivalry games. You have the Banjo Bowl on Sunday, Toronto Hamilton Monday afternoon, and then Monday evening you get the Battle of Alberta. And then I don't know if you had too much time to talk about this either, but obviously the East Division as well this year. I'm gonna paint my picture of it, and I want you to see what you either think of it or what your takes are on it, because I feel like you have a Hamilton team who can't afford a slow start again. You have a Toronto team quietly has the dynasty potential, but we'll see how the season unfolds with everything. You have a Montreal team looking to rebound after a bad taste in their mouth exit to the playoffs last year. But my most intriguing storyline, even as an Argonauts reporter, is Ottawa, a team last year surprised a lot of people, but ultimately when the stages got too big, they kind of crumbled to the pressure. So where do you view the Eastern Division as a whole going into 2025 as a guy who covers a team out west?
The East feels like a lot of parity this season. I will say that, because there's no real team right now that seems head and shoulders above the rest. Obviously, Toronto Argonauts, champions. Chad Kelly has an ingrown toenail, so who knows when we'll see him again. But anyway, I don't know how Chad Kelly bounces back from this latest injury. There's some concerns there. Obviously, Toronto They lose people, as every team does. I really like what they do, but
to Edmonton.
Yeah. But then Bo Levi Mitchell. What did we get out of Bo? I thought he was done. I thought we weren't going to see Bo Levi Mitchell as we've kind of known him. And then he goes out and puts up MOP numbers. And if that team makes playoffs, he might have beat out Brady Oliveira for MOP. So Ottawa, as you mentioned, so interesting. Very intrigued by Ottawa can do, especially if Drew Brown can stay healthy this season. I really like what they've done to kind of rebuild here. But are they ready to take that next step? Because to get into playoffs, get a win over the really battle-tested teams in Toronto, Montreal, and Davis Alexander. We could talk a little bit about that. We'll Absolutely. See what happens there. But Toronto, Montreal's battle-tested. Hamilton, not in the playoffs, but when you have Bo Levi Mitchell, if he comes out slinging again, they really could go on a run. But yeah, Montreal, Davis Alexander didn't feel overly impressed by him in the preseason. He had about a half of football to play. Didn't really feel all that in control. Now, it is only one preseason game. You can't read too much into it. But that is a major thing that team's going to have to overcome, is they gave Davis Alexander the reins on essentially one half of a season of good football. Is he the guy or not? And that's the really biggest question with Montreal.
That really is the big question, because with Montreal, they have a defense to where I trust them, to where if the offense isn't pulling its weight, I feel like the defense can kind of, keep them in games and not let it get out of hand. Because if the offense isn't performing, the defense can perform. But then if there's nights where they're both off, they're going to lose. It's kind of like what we see with the Toronto Blue Jays all the time, where the bats might be going crazy, but the pitching sucks and you end up losing the game because of it. Toronto's biggest question for me is, apart from the quarterback situation, is the defense, because like we're saying, half of them decided, hey, we're going to be Edmonton Elks in 2025, to where now it's not who's the leader in the room, because we all know that's number 48 in McManus, but there's a lot of Argonauts I want to see take that next leap. But for Hamilton, though, it's the famous Simpsons meme of waiting for them to do something stupid. Get it ready, everybody. He's about to do something stupid.
Yeah.
Because for Hamilton last year, I drank the Kool-Aid. I thought, this is the 25th anniversary since their last win. There's no way they're going to extend it. Start off 0-5, and just like that loss to BC was really their nail in the coffin. And I do agree with you on the Bo take. I just think if I had a vote, I would have given it to I would have voted Oliveira, because my opinion, to be the best player on your team, you have to do something to get to the playoffs, and that's what Brady did. Mm-hmm. So with Hamilton, like I said, you can't afford a slow start, and because defensively for them last year, they were atrocious. That defense was just not. You got to see it 2 games very early on. The defense effectively cost them those 2 Saskatchewan games, because look, Saskatchewan, the 2 of them was going back and forth, and then they got the ball late, they made them pay, and they lost those games. So for Hamilton, it's that, but then Ottawa ultimately. That's why I say that the opening night's very intriguing, because if Ottawa comes out and gives a flat performance, everyone's going to walk back any takes they had about the Red Blacks.
Yeah, and I've seen some people putting the Red Blacks in the Grey Cup. There's some people very high on the Ottawa Red Blacks this season, which I don't agree with, but there seems to be a lot of positivity around what they can do and what Drew Brown maybe can accomplish there.
I think with that, it's people thinking like, hey, we see a lot in you, and we know what you're ultimately capable of. It's like Trevor Harris. People know what Trevor can do. People know where Trevor's place is right now. I think Drew Brown has a similar mentality where it's like, Drew, we know what you're capable of. Here's what we expect out of you. And if you put those 2 things together and it works, great. Because I believe the last time the Grey Cup was in Winnipeg, they were in it against Edmonton. So when you have those 2 elements, that's why I think they put them high. I wouldn't dare. I still got to think about who I have as my Grey Cup matchup for 2025, just because A, it's far away, and B, look, we just don't know what we have, because they're all 4 teams. I think you can I said this into the year, I think every team except for Calgary, you can make a case for as to why they're part of the 2 last teams standing come November.
I mean, well, Ottawa's the only team that you don't have kind of a question mark around their quarterback spot, right? You expect what you get out of Drew Brown. Davis Alexander, we don't know. How's Chad Kelly's health? Can Nick Arbuckle have called upon and kind of recreate what he did? We don't know. Hamilton, is Bo able to repeat what he did last year? Or was last year a product of a bad defense where he had to throw for a ton of yards just to be competitive? So that's why I guess I can see why some people are really high on Ottawa just because the quarterback spot, but I'm not ready to just say that they're one of the best teams in the East quite yet. I still view Toronto up there. Like I just view everyone else above them, but I see where there's some positivity there.
Yeah, like I view the positivity. Like I could tell that like Sean Burke wants the team to do well. I know Bob Dice, who those two are in pivotal years too, because I think if they really take a step back, we're going to see another regime change in the nation's capital, and hopefully less games where it's pouring rain out. Because I feel like last year, anytime there was a game in Ottawa, it was just pouring rain. But no, it's like you could, because like when I say you can make a case, you can make the case for Ottawa. But if you had to say to me, do you take Ottawa or the field to get to Winnipeg? I'm going the field because you have the two last Grey Cup champions, and you have a Hamilton team who's really on a warpath to make noise.
Yeah, we'll see. That's the best part about CFL football. You mentioned it. Any team outside of Calgary, we think we can see the path to a Grey Cup.
And it's not that I'm trying to dog Calgary and say, oh, they're going to be this, oh, they're going to be that, because like the CFL is unpredictable. It's just every other team in the West, even Winnipeg. Like, for example, because like here's the thing too with the Red Blacks and the Rough Riders comparisons, why that game can be so interesting from storyline perspectives. Because you have a Saskatchewan team who had the same thing, brings a new staff, gets guys to buy in, gets off to an electric start last year, and then boom, they're in the West final. Ottawa, obviously, like they got their doors blown off in the East semifinal. It was a close game, but then it wasn't. To where with Ottawa, it's you did this for Act 1. What's Act 2? That's where it's intriguing.
Yeah, absolutely. I just can't wait. CFL football's back. It's exciting to see how these storylines are going to unfold here.
It's radically Canadian. And as I can hear someone else behind you looking for attention, just before we wrap things up, obviously I mentioned the stations you're a part of earlier, but Britton, if anyone wants to follow you and follow your action all season long, now's your chance to tell them. Where can they find you?
Yeah, on 980 CJME, 650 CKOM, as you mentioned, on our sports show, The Green Zone. Follow me on Twitter and on Blue Sky, actually, at Britton Gray, my name. And then myself and my colleague, Jamie Nye, who's the host of The Green Zone. We also have the Blitz podcast that we put out every week. More rider-centric, yes, but we do go around the CFL and break it down, make our predictions each week, and we'll see. We're predicting a great year of football in Saskatchewan and hoping we're right, because after Winnipeg was in Mosaic Stadium, I think it would be hilarious for the Riders to get to Winnipeg and be in their home locker room.
Oh, it would be definitely a great moment, and there'd be a lot of Bombers fans in that crowd. That would be pissed off. But anyway, I hope the Saskatchewan Roughriders have a great season. This is a blast getting to do this with you, Britton. We'll have to chat it up again soon. But anyway, guys, I'm Griff. This has been episode number 362 of YWC Football Talk. And just remember, radically Canadian football is still great football. Have a good night.